Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paige Beveridge. I'm the Manager of Communications at the Royal Society of Canada, and I am delighted to MC 7 presentations in this session. I would like to welcome the new fellows and college members who were newly inducted into the academies and the College of the Royal Society of Canada. Round of applause. Events such as these allow all of us to learn more about and appreciate the distinct contributions of members of the RSC community. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the event, so please hold your questions until then. Throughout the presentations, we encourage you to share your takeaways on social media by using the hashtag COEE2023. Listening to today's presentations, it will soon become apparent that through leading-edge research, RSC members are developing innovative ideas, technological advances, and creative solutions that address some of today's greatest challenges. Let's get started. Our first presenter is going to be David Garneau. David Garneau, Métis, is a professor of visual arts at the University of Regina. He is a painter, curator, and critical art writer who engages creative expressions of Indigenous contemporary ways of being. Garneau has given keynotes in Australia, New Zealand, the United States, and throughout Canada. His paintings are in numerous public and private collections. He was awarded the Governor General's Awards in Visual and Media Arts Outstanding Achievement. Welcome, David.
Thank you so much. Well, it's quite an honor to be part of this group. I am now officially a good fella, I guess. And I've got so much to show you. I've got 56 slides. I'm not going to show them all to you. And I've decided instead of focusing on breadth of activity, I'm going to do a few projects in depth. As mentioned, when I'm writing, I consider myself primarily a writer, sort of a theorist, interested in writing essays that and book chapters and that sort of thing that affect change. Mostly interested right now on possibilities of Indigenous public art, what it means to have collaborations with Indigenous people, particularly in art museums and heritage museums. These are my ancestors, Laurent and Eleanor Garneau, and they came from Red River in 1869. After the resistance, it was kind of a hot time for people, especially people who were considered soldiers during that time. And so Laurent and Eleanor got as far away as they could from Red River and settled in Edmonton. So Edmonton, if you know at all, was actually a Métis settlement primarily. It was a Hudson's Bay settlement, but 80% of the folks living there were French Métis, and that's why they have the river lot system. And the yellow one, which is now slowly being encroached on by the University of Alberta, is lot number 7, which was their property, and it's still called the Garneau district. And there's the Garneau tree that Eleanor planted in 1874 and had to come down. I guess it's been about 5 years now, and we had a big ceremony for it. Chopped it up into bits, and all the pieces of the wood went to various community organizations. They can make awards and sculptures and that sort of thing. And I show that because a lot of my practice is kind of invisible, certainly to the academic scene. You know, I'm known for exhibitions that I curate. I've curated the Museum of the American Indian in New York, Smithsonian, a couple of co-curated exhibitions in Sydney, Australia, Regina, that kind of thing. That stuff's well known, but working community less so. It's something that I don't publish about, don't write about. Talking about today as a form of publishing, I suppose. So I'm going to talk about the bridge. This is called the Tuatuna Bridge, and I want to commission to do paintings for the bridge. And originally I proposed 100 paintings. So there's a walkway below and a train goes above, and so these paintings would be attached to the ceiling. And but in doing my research with community, mostly Cree elders and knowledge keepers, people who live in the area, and the Métis Nation, it ended up being 543 paintings. So they're attached to the ceiling. They range in size for about this big to 28 feet by 4 feet, but the average is about 4 feet around. That big fish there is probably 16 feet long. And the research consisted of gathering stories, various Indigenous stories from the area, the animals, the plants. And I've taken a number of tours. So every year in May, I take tours through, sometimes with elders, usually on my own, school groups, that kind of thing. And it's kind of complicated, but first glance, people will say, oh, I live in the community, I've seen these paintings up on the ceiling for 3 years, and I understand this. I do the talk through, and they realize that they saw maybe 1%. There's everything from hidden codes. There's Morse code in 2 paintings that refer to messages around the 1885 resistance. There's all kinds of visual references to plants that are medicine. So there's a giant strawberry in that slide over there. It's about 8 feet by 6.5 feet, and that refers to heart medicine. There's a horse there, and then there's a train superimposed inside of it, which is a train actually from the Edmonton region, which is in Heritage Park, which I have another project there. But it's also paired with things nearby at the consequences of the railroad in the region. So people with knowledge can point through, so Papa's Chase Creek can come through and tell the story that'll be totally different. And things are arranged in a special order. So things are more on the Indigenous on the south side, where a lot of the Métis settlers were. And then on the Fort side, they moved towards the colonial story. And then there's also an arrangement of animals. So the closer we are to the middle, you've got humans on either bank, and then in the middle, it's primarily fish and birds. So many complicated things. There's Lawrence Garneau hidden in there. So part of my reconciliation project, so in terms of writing, I write about conciliation versus reconciliation, and with the Papa's Chase Cree, I have a form of reconciliation. So my grandfather was imprisoned in 1885 in Edmonton, and Papa's Chase, the Cree leader of the time, whose reserve was in South Edmonton, but they got disenfranchised within a few years by 1873. And but they were great friends, and so when Laurent was imprisoned, then Papa's Chase took his whole family in, which was 12 kids and his wife Eleanor, and when he was finally released and not hung, they only ended up moving to St. Paul de Métis, and Garneau became quite prosperous. And so he found out that Chief Papa's Chase was being, basically, they had lost his land, had lost his community, was all dispersed. And so Laurent built him a cabin and in St. Paul de Métis so he could live out his remaining life. And for me, I'd known that story. I didn't know the last part of the story, but in meeting with the current chief, Kelvin Bruno, he told me the rest of the story. And so now we go various times throughout Edmonton. We did the last one in May. We tell that long story, a longer version of that story to people. So those stories are actually embedded there. So you'll see like a woodpecker next to Laurent, and Papa's Chase in Cree means woodpecker. So there's all these other things that if you have to go through with the story keeper. So none of these stories are written down. So it takes me about an hour and a half to tell just a fraction of the story walking through. None of them are written down, so part of the idea is that the stories will be embodied in the people that I train or that the elders I'm working with train, and then they pass it down, but it'll never be written down. So that way, the story, instead of being embedded in a book or other device, it has to be a living Indigenous person who walks you through. One of the interesting things, though, with this project was when I went to the Métis Nation, explained what I wanted to do, they didn't believe me that there'd be such a Métis presence on here. And I said, okay, let's go. I gave them advance warning, told them what my project was, and a bunch of these old ladies and men came together with their books and photographs and told me what I was I said, you know, I've got 100 panels on there, what am I going to put up? And they pulled out their binders and their photographs, and we all came up with the first 15 images. And I said, yeah, I've already painted those, now where do we go? And so the learning I got from them and some Cree elders was the responsibility of the artist is help visualize these stories, because the elder has some images in their mind, but they can't share the image. They're doing it through text or through oral. So how do we solve that problem? That's the role of the artist. So it's been quite a challenge. Jerry Saddleback was my main advisor on this project and a project they did at Fort Edmonton, which I don't have time to talk about. Oh, there it is. If you're ever in Edmonton, go to the Fort Edmonton Experience. It's a multi-million-dollar project with Hollywood filmmakers and lighting crew and sound. It's extraordinary. So I was the art director, and so all the images are based on my paintings. This is a great piece. As you walk in, it's a history of Edmonton from the bison and animals going through up to civilization and then going back when that period's over. I've got a few minutes left. So I dress as Louis Riel. I go to John A. Macdonald statues throughout the country and have a conversation with him. They usually don't go so well. You can go to the Walmart, get these toys. You used to be able to get these toys of John A. Macdonald, prise open the pack and put in a noose in there and put it back on the shelf for the kiddies to enjoy and tell stories with each other. This is me doing the performance. So this is in Kingston. The previous one was in Regina, and both those statues have been removed. I also did it at Ottawa, but I don't think that metal John's going anywhere. I designed the Louis Riel coin. As a curator, I've worked with Indigenous women for the last, say, 8 years doing these exhibitions. The interesting thing about them in terms of methodology is that objects in the exhibition, particularly in this one, about a quarter of the objects actually went away to the community in this one to do something. They went on visits while the show was up, or they were being made and put in during the show. And then we had story keepers, Indigenous people in there always talking about the work. Anyways, my time's up. Thank you very much.